creative studies.
All right, George, 2026 is upon us, if you can believe that. I'm curious what, companies spend millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to predict, where the next year might be going. Curious for your thoughts on the business landscape, what you think's up in store for 2026 that our listeners should know about.
Oh man. I mean, you and I were talking about this previously about, you know, massive consolidations, a lot of like the ambiguity. A lot of people are just kind of wondering where the bottom is, when the bottom is going to drop out, when that other shoe is going to drop, so to speak. Um, I think the thing that I'm seeing is just a craving for tangibility. I think a lot of people are stressed about the ambiguity, about just being unsure. And that's what's manifesting in our business environment. Clients from the agency standpoint are looking for things that they can hold and touch. I don't think anyone's pulling back on production stuff, but maybe less in terms of looking at the long tail or looking at, a few calendar years, like a few quarters ahead, trying to like get ahead of things. But it's like, what do we need right now? What's going to move the bottom line? You know, um, and a mentor of mine said to me once, and I think it really rings true right now, is cost cutting is the new revenue.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's tangible. You can touch that. You can see the difference that it's making. And I think, you know, the idea of risky bets is terrifying for folks. You know, um, People want to take smart bets. I'm not saying people are completely pulling back from taking any sort of risk, but how can they mitigate the risk? How can they be thoughtful about it? Um, the tone of research has changed a little bit for us in that it's less about, you know, insight versus behavior.
Yep.
Well, what's driving core behaviors, what's happening at the shelf, what's coined as that moment of truth for folks versus let's look far ahead and see how we can't shift them. And it's not that people aren't interested in it, but when they're looking for tangible answers in terms of decision making right now, like what's real, what's happening, what can we touch?
It leads to, I guess you brought up a good point there. There's less risk that's going on right now just because people are, I think, fearing, well, what does the future hold? So what does that mean for most of the businesses that you and I work with? Are they going to be less creative when it comes to risk? Are they going to try to find other alternative routes? Are they going to just go the route of, hey, let's cost cut our way to profitability as long as we can until something out there changes? Is 2026 going to be a slower year compared to 2025, or is that uncertain right now?
I think 2026 is definitely going to be a slower year. Now, I'm certainly not an economist. I think it's going to be slower in terms of being measured, right? Let's make sure that the actions we take have clarity, that we understand the risks that we're taking. I think for agencies, I think for consultants, for folks that are asking someone to take a chance or try something new, the pressure is on us to demonstrate that what we're proposing is a risk worth taking, right? That extra step of going, hey, look, this is the impact that we project. This is the behavior and the outcome that we expect based on this, and demonstrating from research, from behavior, how it's happening, pointing towards, again, tangible things that we're seeing in the marketplace, where the behavior is shifting, and giving people the confidence to make those decisions and take risks. So again, it's not that it's slowing down because businesses don't have to spend to stay in business and don't have to market. I think they just want to be thoughtful. And one thing that a lot of folks are recognizing right now is being first isn't necessarily equating to being the best.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. I have to constantly tell people, let's look at, business history when they say, well, we need to be first to market or fastest. It's like, well, Google wasn't first. Look how they've done. You have all these different scenarios that are out there of companies that were fourth, fifth, maybe sixth to market, and they did quite well. So it almost is trying to figure out like, you know, should we be first? Do we need to be as fast as we were in the past? Which leads to me to this question that I want to ask you. Are you finding that people are taking a deeper time? They want to go deeper in terms of like figuring things out. So it automatically slows down the pulse of things. So even though you have people out there saying, "Oh, the pace of change is really fast," that's not necessarily true because people are really like slowing down to try to see what's coming around the corner. What are your thoughts on that based on how business has been this past year in 2025?
I think part of it is also the way that partners are set up, in that no one wants to move slow, right? But if you're not prepared to provide the evidence, to demonstrate the rigor, I think what you're going to see from vendors, from agencies in 2026 is the ability to move faster, to provide that, to think ahead instead of waiting for the question. You know, here is the speculation. It's not just the opportunity we spotted, but the impact that we think we're going to make, and showing you answers that aren't just what you prefer, but demonstrating why it's a better solution. A lot of times, especially creative agencies historically, and I mean, this is the advent of strategic planning, right? Relied on being tastemakers and curators versus being able to demonstrate, here's the right moment, here's the right opportunity, here's the trend that we're taking advantage of, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So if you had to pick, let's say, one tangible trend, we'll put you on the spot here. What do you think is one tangible trend we should take note of for 2026 that if someone's watching this, they get a better idea of maybe where to move some of their money when it comes to strategic planning?
Way to move some of their money. Oh man. It's really on this notion of like leveling up in everything that it touches, from reskilling and so forth. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm completely in love with the quarter zips and matchas, right?
I have seen it. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not escape that
You
trend?
can't escape quarter zips and matcha right now. But I think when you start to unpack it, it's not a trend about fashion, right?
No,
Not
no.
it's not the death of streetwear, that which is not going anywhere. Nigo just took streetwear to an IPO, right? So um sneakers and streetwear is not going anywhere. But I think what you're seeing is a generational shift, saying we're taking the driver's seat now because we feel like we haven't had a clear roadmap on how we're going to level up,
Yeah.
how we're going to find our way to success. I think it's tapping into the resilience of the American dream. A decade ago, we were calling it the end of the American dream, not from an economic standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint, right? Economic standpoint, the signs were there much earlier, but that was an ongoing conversation, right? It goes as far back as 20 years ago in like Bowling Alone. Um,
Great
but
book. Yep.
yeah, we were really making the call about like no one was believing in the American dream anymore. And in some ways, when you hear young people talking about quarter zips and matcha, they're talking about, no, I believe that I can be successful again. I can take control, you
Yeah.
know, and if I make the right moves, I'm going to put myself in the driver's seat. And even though it's a very tangible, superficial move right now, it's a sign. And it's also a sign of sort of a move back to a bit of a monoculture, right?
Yes.
Hey,
Yes.
we're all buying into this. It's something that we all know about, we all recognize. We're not giving up individuality, but we're saying, hey, look, we're subscribing to a social convention that we all agree on, that this is what success looks like.
Yes.
And so within that, the trend that you ask about, I think is like people on an independent standpoint aren't trusting organizations. I'm not going to get management training from my company anymore. I'm not going to necessarily be on this track. And we haven't been on for 20 years, but now you're seeing a move towards, hey, look, we're going to take control of our own destinies. Whether it's been like the side hustle, the second, the third job, whether it's like going back to school or, remote education at night, whether that's masterclass, University of Phoenix, or like a Harvard EMBA.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up or brought, this up because it really does show, um, what has it's almost like you have the discussion around change is very fast and slow at the same time. It's like all of a sudden you have people saying, okay, let's level up, clothes make who I am, which is why I think you have fashion trending in a certain way, which is back to professionalism because of the fact that it trended another way 5 years ago when it was like, well, I'm just going to sort of be in my pajamas while I'm in my living room working. Um, so people are wanting to present themselves a certain way, but it also is because people are saying, "Hey, I'm entrepreneurial. I'm my own independent operator. So I want to make sure I come across a particular way, and everything is an opportunity. So I'm going to I think that's why those things are starting to sort of happen out there that
Right.
had been left by the wayside for a bit. We didn't think about that, and I think it's gonna open up some interesting doors in 2026.
It's people saying, I'm not going to wait for like a company to set the dress
That's
code.
right.
I'm
That's
going to,
right.
I'm going to set it for myself. Right. So that notion of like taking control is really exciting for me from like a trend and social standpoint. And if I'm companies, it's like, how do I set you up for success?
Yep.
How do I make sure that you're fit to finish?
I really think that 2026, if I had to sort of pick a trend, is, it's the first year that we can probably define the portfolio career will be much more accepted in terms of a mainstream fashion. I just had a conversation, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this with someone this week who said, hey, could you tell us where where you were employed this past year? And I said, wait a minute, where I was employed, one place or the various places that I was employed. And I think what struck them is they were shocked by the fact that someone could have multiple places that they're working. I don't think we'll look at that as weird in a couple of years, but I still think that is met with some resistance by people who assume that you're just going to have one job at a given time. Curious for your thoughts on
I,
that in terms of the
yeah.
career outlook trend.
No, I agree with that 100%. Right. The funny thing is for a long time, the idea of having more than one job was something that we looked at as being lower on the socioeconomic scale.
That's right.
Right? And yet the irony is people on the top end of the socioeconomic scale were the ones who were working multiple jobs, multiple companies, multiple roles, board of
That's right.
directors, kind of thing. Right. It just wasn't ever a mainstream middle class thing because there was the expectation that your one job would take care of you. I
That's
think the
right.
biggest thing is going to be what are the expectations of employers now when you know that someone has multiple jobs? Like, are you going to be able to like be upset that they're not giving you more than 50 hours a week or for even 40 hours a week because now your contract with them is exactly for 40 hours a week?
That's right.
And giving them the benefits if you're not covering all of healthcare. Like very rarely does any company provide full healthcare anymore, right?
Nope.
When
Nope.
we came into the business, 100% of our healthcare was covered.
That's right.
Now, like if your employer is at 10 or 15%, you know, covering 90% of your healthcare, that's amazing.
That's right.
You know,
That's right. You're
so
yeah. Yeah.
and then those costs are going up. So it's like, are you going to be able to have those expectations anymore? I'll give you an anecdote. My first job out of school, I really wanted the job, but I didn't get the salary that I wanted. Right. Um, and so every night after work, I would leave at 5:30. And my supervisor, the one who negotiated my contract, finally, after like a couple of weeks, was like, "Where are you going? Everyone else is here. It's an ad agency. You're young. Everyone's working late." And she's like, "Where are you going at 5:30 every single day?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to my second job." you know, and it was really like a clear dig that you're not paying me enough that now I'm going to go work at
That's
this
right.
restaurant.
That's right.
But now,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, keep going. Keep going.
no, but now it's like, hey, how many of us have multiple email addresses? How many of us are like starting a side hustle and Etsy? My wife works at Sesame Street, but she's also an author.
That's
You know,
right.
Certainly you and I are classic case studies on entrepreneurs who are doing multiple things. But I think the
Yep.
shift is going from it used to be something we saw with people who said, wow, you're really entrepreneurial. And now we look at it as like, wow, you're kind of normal. I think the critical shift, and it's not going to happen next year, but it's going to happen within the next 5 years, is going to have to be when it shifts from being something that you have to do to something that you want to do.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. I would agree with that. I also think it changes how people approach the term entrepreneur, entrepreneurship and working for yourself. Because every time someone's like, well, I don't really want to work for myself, I want to work for others. I'm like, no, you still can under this dynamic we're in. You're just working for multiple people, as you noted, George, where you're like, hey, I have this job. It's most of my income, but I also have these two other things that I do that, pay me some pocket change where necessary, which which people, need for like a rainy day scenario.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's strange anymore. I do think it's interesting when people say like, can you commit to this and give me all 50 hours or whatever? And it's like, well, yeah, if you can pay me what I'm sort of worth, I'll give you the 50 or 60 hours. But a lot of times companies aren't willing to do that. And that's why I think we're left with people saying, well, no, I'm going to have multiple things going on at a given time. Plus, I'm an independent contractor, let's say. So you don't really have any right to tell me what's going to happen
It's
there.
at will employment, right?
That's right.
I mean,
That's
I
right.
hate to say it like this, but with the structure of at will employment, your employer is your biggest client. They're not, it's not a relationship. It's not a family. And I've had familial relationships with some of my employers and like have loved places that I've worked. It's not to denigrate like the people or the cultures, but I think from a legal standpoint, people shift that way. When I talk about the shift that you're going to see, when it moves away from I have to I want to. So like a good example is John Runyon was an NFL player, right? I remember
Yep.
reading this article years ago. Drove an Uber at night. People are
That's
like,
right.
what? Why?
That's right.
He's like, middle of the season, I'm not going out drinking. I like talking to people. And I like driving. So end of the night, I get in my car and I drive around. And he's an NFL player. He clearly does not need the money, right?
Yep.
So he's doing it for fun to drive his car and chat people up. Over Thanksgiving, our friends that hosted us for Thanksgiving, my wife is a marvelous cook, makes wonderful desserts. And she is starting to make her banana pudding and croissant bread pudding, like a croissant pudding that she makes. Now, during the day, she works with realtors in a real estate office. So she's actually selling the confectionaries and the goods that she makes to the agents for their open houses. So you're seeing these synergies that are starting to exist. This isn't one of those
That's
cases
right.
where like, he's like, I have to do it. She's like, I love doing this anyway. Like, what was I going to do on the weekend? I'm going to make stuff and I love doing it. And now it starts to turn into the things that I love to do on top of that.
That's right. Yeah. Which is why you're going to see lots of different jobs that in the past someone would say, I don't know if that's really a job, will become jobs. Things like life coaching, things like, how to navigate uncertainty that, we sort of laugh at now. We might be like, don't just, why don't you just go read a book on that? More people, I think, will tap into that because they'll be like, I need someone who can do those things. I mean, I think there's lots of good alternative examples that are out there of things that people do because they enjoy doing them that it actually will become uh, quite lucrative for some people.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think we'll see some of these other platforms too, the shifts on these platforms from Etsy to Patreon, like
Yes.
how to start to expand for like individuals. How does it start to become like a very normalized kind of thing?
Yes.
You know, violin teacher on Patreon, not just like an artist that you're subscribing to, but like utilizing that platform. Look, during COVID, I started doing remote yoga instruction from a friend of mine that's a yoga teacher in Seattle. In fact,
Uh,
because she was sort of at a loss for going like, hey, how am I gonna navigate COVID because
yeah.
my studio had to close down. So as a friend, one selfishly, I still needed classes, but it's funny. We've checked in recently, and she's like, yeah, I never stopped. It just became a part of my practice.
That's right. An extension of your practice. You're going to see a lot of this now that I think is going to be interesting. Let's put on, let's put on the cap. It's a year from now. We're regrouping. We're talking about 2026 in the rear view mirror. What's one thing that you think is definitely going to happen that we'll be talking about a year from now?
A year from now,
Not
one
to
of the
put you on the spot.
no, I love being put on the spot about this. I I think a lot of the things are things that have been building up that we're seeing, right? Like we're talking about like people putting down phones, walking away from them.
That's right.
Um, I think one of the things that we're going to see within this is a greater return to curation, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, we talked about we've been talking about this for years. We grew up with DJs picking the music for us, and now we kind of get overwhelmed. And now you're like looking for people who are putting together playlists. I think that's only going to be exacerbated with AI. So more and more, we're going to be looking for people to like kind of point us in the right direction. Like someone's job is going to be to sift through all the slop, right? Like people are going to get frustrated of hours and hours of scrolling through like YouTube shorts and go, God, someone just like give me a little bit of this. And this goes back, but this is like Barry Schwartz's paradox of choice, right? We're
That's right.
overwhelmed. So, but since that book came out and today, we've been looking for the human shortcuts, like I try not to order from the menu anymore. I try and order a trick I picked up from a podcast. I try and order something that someone at the table's ordering because I'm like, oh, that sounds good. Or like if I see something walk by,
Yeah.
more tactile sensations and going like, hey, let me see with my own eyes. Like I want to do this. I think what you're going to see in the next year is actually that becoming a job and a role that we've gone from hacks to being, hey, can I just pay someone for that?
Yeah. I
And
think,
whether
uh,
we're
I
paying
think,
with money.
yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think people are sort of over how do I make things easy and really more how do I figure out how to navigate sort of complexity and ambiguity, but understand sort of, what's going on out there, wanting to really know more about what's in front of us rather than like, yeah, I just need the easiest and quickest way to do it, which flies in the face of sort of this efficiency model we've been on for the past, I'd say, 2 to 3 years. Because maybe, in all of this hyper efficiency, people will finally be like, I'm sort of tired of that. Like, yeah, that's great,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really lead to any quality of life improvement. Doesn't lead
That's really
really to
it,
much
right?
effectiveness.
It's become overwhelming. It's just become so overwhelming. Streaming platforms are a really good example, right? It's like, hey, at your home, at your convenience, when you want it, how you want it, right? And then now you're finding yourself constantly navigating between like 8 to 10 different ones. Is it Rocket that came out? And so now Rocket's advertising campaign is like, hey, help us make sure that you're not being double charged
That's
on this
right.
stuff. Because
That's right.
tech has so focused on frictionless, and we forgot the role that friction kind of played in some of this because it made it so that we didn't have to think. It slowed things down a little bit so we could make decisions, make choices. And certainly like from a government policy standpoint, you know, we're not getting consumer protections anymore. And it's
No.
just going to exacerbate things, so we're going to look for those services from the credit card company. We're going to look for those services from like One Medical to get a doctor's appointment versus going to the doctor, right?
Yep.
Um, those kinds of things I think are the things that we're going to start to see the move for, where it's like, okay, make it easier for me, curate for me, go through and like, you know, actually have someone look at it. What's the next evolution of like Wirecutter beyond just like reviews? Does it actually become like a shopping service where it's
Yep.
only things that they've let through?
Yep. Yep. Which is interesting because I have been watching more reviews this past year where people have finally, said, this is what I use. Like I'm reviewing different things, but like this is the actual product that I use. And I think those are things that people are actually looking for from reviewers. Cause in the past, It was like, let's just be objective. Let's have no bias here and let's just sort of review. But like, it's like, hey, I'm trying to make up my mind on all these things. To your point, George, it's like there's just too much abundance. Just tell me what you personally use. So reviewers are now finally getting into the I'm going to review different things. I'm going to give it a grade, but I'll also tell you sort of what I personally use. Because that 9 times out of 10 is what people are seeking, whether it's a new piece of software or a physical good of some type that they're trying to figure out, you know, what they need to buy or rent in order to utilize.
Absolutely. We don't have time to test all this stuff out anymore. I mean, and some of this stuff, this is where I go back to it's not new, right? Like years and years ago, we already talked about how um people stopped test driving cars, right? And this was like in 2005, we were already declaring this, that it was really when you showed up at the dealership, it was a confirmation drive. You kind of knew
That's right.
90% of what you want. When you
That's
go to
right.
Foot Locker, you're not going in there to like look for a pair of shoes. You're going in there because you have an idea of what pair of shoes you already wanted. And then you're just like, do you guys have it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so that that greater shift has happened to things. And I think what you see in 2026 is the institutionalization of that, where the platforms, the companies start to bring it in, right?
Yep.
Amazon already does it. You can look at someone's like Amazon list, but right now it tends to be a celebrity going like, hey, what does like, Michael Jordan buy? But
Yep.
I know you, Jeff. At a certain point, I'm more likely to go, oh, what's the sound equipment Jeff is using?
Yep.
Not the sound equipment that Bob Power is using because I'm not doing that same kind of production, right?
We'll have to see if what comes to fruition here with our sort of predictions for 2026.
Thanks for having me.
Creative studies.